You're alive. Gotta be it.
All right.
Who is she?
All right.
Yeah.
So, welcome. This is our bi-monthly streaming video and presentation. Again, today's topic is anger management communication solutions in 3D. And we'll be looking at dangerousness. Again, anger management communication solutions in 3D. The 3D being, of course, diatribe, discussion, and dialogue. And one of the interesting phenomenological pieces of information that I love language. And one of the things they talk about is attractors. Have you ever heard the term attractors? ATTRACTORS. This is in my notes. Attractor is a pattern that develops, and that pattern that develops is informative, and the pattern develops naturally, spontaneously, and there are certain mathematical models that take and look at how things develop like that, and there's lots of interesting concepts behind it, but for me, as a psychiatrist, one of the things that I'm always interested in is in patterns, because the truth of the matter is pattern recognition. Pattern recognition. When we look at people, we can predict what's going to happen based on on patterns. For example, homes tend to look the same. There's a roof, there are walls, there are windows. It has a pattern to it. And so you have to look at the patterns that evolve. Even when we talk to each other, there's a pattern. 80% of the times when we are dealing with each other, the things we were talking about is subconscious, and it's based on pattern and pattern recognition. So that concept of pattern recognition is very important, because a lot of times when we make decisions about what we're going to do or not do, it's based on those patterns that we observe. And so one of the stories I always tell is about the fact of the matter is that people tend to live in their own heads. You may have two people sitting down next to each other, and you may think that they're sharing the same experiences, but they're having quite different experiences. And I always give the example of the Greyhound bus. You have two travelers on a Greyhound bus, and the bus breaks down in a kind of in a town that's really like a tombstone kind of town. There's nothing there. It's a wasteland. It's just a waste town. So the bus is broken down, and the conductor says, "Hey, we got to get a bus coming to give us some help." So one guy is sitting there reading his book and listening to his videos and enjoying himself, and another guy is white knuckling it, and because the town, is foreboding, and it brings up the issue of dangerousness and trauma in his life, and that's because everybody lives in their own heads. So for one guy, the experience is, hey, we're just in this little quaint town, and we're kind of broken down, and things are going to solve itself eventually. But for the other guy, the bareness of the town, the starkness of the town, represent for him dangerousness and loss and grief, and he's white knuckling it, and he's looking around, and he's about to fragment, because social relations begin to break down, and he doesn't know what's going to happen next. And so that's one of the, as a psychiatrist, those are one of the things I look at in terms of looking at patterns that develop, And we've been going through a series of presentations talking about language and the importance of language. We started out with the idea that language is everything. Human beings we're defined by being animals that can speak. We have a language. But even the language itself has a certain architectural frame to it. That's why we have a program called The Essential Architecture of Loss and Grief. And it's based on the idea that language gives you some insights into what people are experiencing in their lives and so forth and so on. So we start out with the importance of language. It is everything, but language in itself evolves. You look at a little kid, probably wants a cracker. To this today, I was in my office, and there was a little baby there, and he was like about 16 months, and he was, every now and then you could say a word, but he would just scream, "Ah!" And I was sitting there screaming with him, "Ah!" And he looked at me, and he just loved it. The fact that I was responding to him screaming. yeah. And the mom was just, I said, it's language. He's trying to explore language, and he's now making a connection with me that I'm also out of control and screaming and having fun with him. And the kid was just laughing and rocking back and forth. He was just enjoying himself. And mom was,
What's going on?
What's going on here? Is this doctor for real?
She was trying to suppress it.
Was she trying to suppress it?
Trying to
But
suppress
again, language is everything, and usually when we start out in life, the thing that makes us excited about life, the aesthetics of life, is acquiring language and mobility, being able to speak and have people respond to you, and tell people little lies or see how they respond.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just exciting. It is novel. It's wonderful. It's exciting, and so throughout our lives, we have this thing called ethic speech. It's usually meaningless speech. It's just a question of running around labeling and naming things. It's meaningless. But it has a certain underlying physiological correlate. Because intimacy is usually nonlinear. And when you think about the connection, the circuitry in the brain, when you're just having ethic speech, you're going here, there, and everywhere, you're lighting up different parts of the brain. In our conversation, we talk about it as like running through a little kid running through a house with his parent. And he said, Mom, what's this room? This is the bedroom. What is this place? This is this. What is this kitchen? It's a kitchen. What are you doing in the kitchen? And the kid is running through the house trying to figure out what is things. And just laming things. He says, whoa, this is a prison. Why do we have prisons? I like prisons. I want to be in a prison. No. Prisons for the bad guys. Prisons for people who do dangerous things. Like what? Not eat their broccoli?
Yeah, that's what it is.
You don't eat your broccoli, we're gonna put you in that place called prison.
Those peas.
And so the kid eventually begins to go through a series of conversation through ethic speech. So ethic speech then becomes eidostic speech, which you begin to have cultural meaning imputed to that language frame. So you know what a bedroom is. When I talk to you about a bedroom, I may not go through all of the mayhem and all the consequences of having a bedroom and what it may imply culturally and socially. But a bedroom begins to take on a certain meaning, cultural meaning. And then you go from eidostic speech to eidetic speech, where now you begin to have memories of the bedroom and what might have occurred there. You have memories and you have visualizable memories that can be edited. It's like a dream, People have dreams of bedrooms. And they have all these fantasies about what goes on in the bedroom, and they can edit the dream. You know what I'm talking about, John? You know what I'm talking about? You can edit that dream, right? So that's why speech is very important. Okay. Now, one of the things about speech is that it's the initial, speech evolves. It's in framing initially, but then speech becomes constitutive. It begins to take on its own meaning. It has a certain meaning, and this is some of the books that I've been reading recently, and in terms of doing my research for my presentation. And this is some very exciting stuff to me. Okay, so we are now going to explore dangerousness because of how it's come up in our politics in the last month or so since we've had this campaign, and the implications. We've had the shootings in North Carolina, in Charlotte. We've had the shootings in Oklahoma. And we have had Black Lives Matter and dangerousness. What does it mean? What it doesn't mean, and so forth and so on. And we've had the phenomena of Donald Trump. So the next one is
just press down.
down. Okay.
No, the air.
Yeah.
Pressing too many things.
Where am I pressing?
You're pressing the laser as well. Just press the little button here.
Gotcha. So like I said, opening remarks. I've got 2 or 3 of them. Donald Trump is wonderful. I am tempted to put him on payroll because he's so instructive.
Really?
He is, he's able to demonstrate to me the importance of speech, especially ethic speech, and discursive normalization. This naming randomly, it gives the sense of Fox intimacy. And for most of the country, people who are the real Donald Trump supporters, this idea of confirmational bias, Donald Trump tells you very clearly he was the birther. Obama was not an American. I knew it. Confirmational bias. They may at one level know that it's not really real, but from terms of power and force and moving the system politically, that confirmational bias becomes very important. Now, also, Donald Trump is wonderful because, man, the guy has no empathy.
Mm.
Dangerousness as a social tool to control population. He's brought it up again. He's talked about black cities being the most dangerous place on earth, even more dangerous than certain cities in Afghanistan.
Wow.
He talks about drug use and the dangerousness of that. Now, this observation about his use of dangerousness in a political and racial way has been observed by other people in the media, and it's wonderful to hear people talk and to communicate about this in the media because Americans are very smart people and they're aware of what's happening. Dangerousness after the slaves were freed, 1965. Um, Blacks were considered dangerous, and there was an element of needing to socially control them. And so you had the rise of the prison industrial system in order to control blacks. You have the black codes, which came up soon after the radical Republicans decided to get off the playing field and just cede the entire South to the Democrats and to have them do what they needed to do. It was the birth of Jim Crow and the black codes and the lynchings and other kind of and it was based on this idea that you can animate governmental action based on this concept of dangerousness.
Mm.
So it's about control. Now, one of the other concepts, again, in opening remarks, I love this state of North Carolina and the Governor McCrory. It is amazing, the history of violence and police violence, where the Republicans have decided that they are not going to, for public health reasons, keep statistics on shootings and incidents of shootings. They were not going to do that. And McCrory now signed a piece of legislation which says that they're going to suppress video evidence of police violence because the police union decided that they don't want that. All of these actions where they're catching cops shooting blacks running away and shooting unarmed blacks and not doing a very good job, they don't want that. And you would say, well, why would they want that? What, body cams? Why would they want that? Well, you got to look at the laboratory of the states. And North Carolina has been a state where the revanchist conservatives, Republicans, they're not real conservatives. They're people who use the organs of the state in order to punish and control and to denigrate other populations. And so you have this state of North Carolina where they have voter suppression, where the laws.
It's a test state.
It's a laboratory state. So
Test.
the Supreme Court rolled back all of their legislations, where they were denying voting rights of black early voting and so forth and so on. This is the state where the LGBT community were targeted, where in terms of using bathrooms, and they did that purposefully in order to gin up their religious, the so-called religious elderly white folks, and have them be part of that process. The evangelicals, because of a response against marriage equality. So they decided to put these laws in place to gin it up. Stand your ground laws. That was where they gave certain citizens a green light in order to commit acts of violence against certain populations that were not necessarily protected. And they would give them the cover of law in order to do this. Stand your ground. North Carolina, Ohio, these are states that are open carry states. But if you're a black guy with a toy gun in Walmart, you can be shot dead if the cops roll up on you on the basis of dangerousness. And Donald Trump knows this. And so for me, listening to these guys talk has been really, really interesting because of the way they use language.
Education.
So, opening remarks too. Noam Chomsky on language and Chiswick on dangerousness. Noam Chomsky talked about a system of ideological control where the state uses experts with credentials to certify certain ideological positions, for example, on dangerousness. As a psychiatrist, a forensic psychiatrist, as an expert witness, I am able to opine on dangerousness of certain individuals. And so dangerousness becomes a very important construct for state actors in order to using the idea that you're protecting the public interest. So we have here prosecutorial anxiety. We've talked in our program a lot about prosecutorial anxiety and depressive anxiety and how it fits into managing loss and grief. So dangerousness is real. Dangerous is real. There are real dangerous actors out there. And there is a legitimate state interest in protecting the public interest. Okay, so don't get me wrong. There is a legitimate state interest, but the state of the art is not as firm as people would have you believe. You know, it goes to kind of a metaphysics of truth. What is the nature of truth? What is the nature of truth? What is truth? So it's important to understand that the state is also about justice, doing justice. And so you have to have transparency, you have to have the idea that the state moves towards a just position and to protect everybody. And that is a very important state interest, also justice and protecting everyone. So in ending this opening remarks, I want you to focus as we go forward on a couple of concepts. Ethic speech, we talked about it quite a bit. Little kid talking, meaningless nonsense, you're just running around naming things. And so that is inframing. It's a way of inframing things, getting an idea of where they are, what it is. And then this is very important. This ethic speech, discursive normalization is very important because it's like a starter kit, as we talked about it in the past. People need it. Little kids love being able to talk and to communicate. But a lot of times when you listen to a kid talk, what they're saying don't make sense because it's not been informed by culture or by experience or by memory. And so you have to be very careful with that. So here you have this guy, this actor, this guy, Donald Trump, the chief birther is not the Republican nominee. In this great American democracy, he is the Republican nominee for president. This great birther. I mean, there's something so comedic about this. It's just unbelievable. And we're here having these serious conversations about if this man can become president. This man who has no character, has no empathy, and is very.
I said if he wasn't as rich as he would be a social.
But is he that rich?
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
He's too big to fail. Too big to fail. Anyway, again, looking at the word cloud, the importance of action in being and becoming. Remember that just existing is nothing. If you just exist, you're nothing. People can make you anything you want to be. You know, it's nothing. In order to being and becoming is the most important. It requires action, and action requires that you have choice, and choice has to be informed by knowledge, and acceptance, and aesthetic intimacy. And those are the important things to keep in mind here. Now, the important construct that I want you to keep in mind is this difference between force and power. Force and power. Prosecutorial anxiety and dangerousness. Now, before we go to the next slide, I want to talk briefly about force and power. In terms of conscious development, most human beings, when they're kids in that phase of mastery and power unto death, what they're dealing with is force. They're not dealing with power. And we're going to have some slides talking about the difference between power and force. You begin to truly acquire power when you go to that phase of conscious development, which I term stoicism. Stoicism is being able to live with less intimacy, being able to accept and still thrive. And that's because you're beginning to develop self-power, self-control. That is real power. Being able to stand still. That's where you begin to see it present itself in the 7 stages of conscious development. Mastery, power unto death, master-slave relationship, stoicism, skepticism and cynicism, unhappy consciousness, and rational choice. Everything is about choice. And a lot of times, early before rational choice, your choice is really informed by prejudice and other factors that are not necessarily healthy or useful. Ethic speech, confirmational bias. And if you have been anybody who's been victimized by racial bias and prejudice and people limiting you and not giving you your agency, you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so dangerousness. Dangerousness has been a very important construct and has a significant role in forensic psychiatry. It's important in forensic psychiatry in terms of public safety because it informs the courts in terms of looking at which actors are dangerous, and it gives the government the basis on which to restrict the liberty of its citizens. One of the important cases, there are many of them, but the one that I wanted to bring forth today is the 1966 case, the Supreme Court of the United States, the case looking at the Dannemora State Prison, and the case of Johnny Bachstrom. This is a mentally ill actor who in 1959 assaulted someone, and he was sentenced to an insane asylum for the criminally insane based on dangerousness, and he was kept there. Now, if he did not have that label of mental illness and dangerousness, he would have been sentenced maybe to two years or less, and then he would have been released. But because of mental illness and dangerousness, the state decided to keep him there ad infinitum. Of course, we have similar political manifestations of this kind of dilemma, governmental dilemma in Gitmo, the prison in Guantanamo Bay. And that the issue there is not mental illness. The issue there is about dangerousness, and the actor being dangerous actor, they go back to the field, they can become dangerous again. Anyway, Johnny Bachstrom in 1959 assaulted someone, and he was committed to an insane asylum, and he sued. In 1966, the case was finally adjudicated, where the Supreme Court says, no, these guys had to be reassessed, and you have to release those that can be released. And so they created a different test, and 3% of the 966 inmates that had coverage under this in the Dannemora State, 3% were actually retained, but the rest were released. And of all of those who were released, only 2 went on to commit serious crimes.
Right.
Two. And so here it was. These guys were sentenced, and the state decided to keep them forever, until the Supreme Court made a decision that justice needed more than that.
It need to be reevaluated.
And you need to reevaluate it, right?
Incremental times.
So dangerousness, it exists. It informs the court and the judicial system regarding dangerousness. The problem with dangerousness is what is truth and how do you assess truth. This is one of those wonderful, wonderful philosophical points. What is the nature of dangerousness? There's little consensus validity on dangerousness. As a matter of fact, when we assess dangerousness, the most important thing we look at is previous evidence for previous behavior of dangerous behavior is the most predictive element in predicting who's going to be dangerous and who's not going to be dangerous. But even that doesn't necessarily help you. So, for example, somebody who might have killed a family member, the chance of them really killing anybody else, a lot of times, is very, very low. Very low. But then again, the political system as it is, where it elevates dangerousness, creates different dynamics around dangerousness and how state actors act in limiting people's freedoms.
Question: you said if somebody can get away with killing a family member, the chances of them doing it a second time is very, very low. But let's take it 3 years ago. What about that guy who was a cop and he killed a barrage? The big guy. He kind of looked like Chris, whatever his name is, Donaldson or something like that.
Donald.
There you go.
Dorner.
And what's funny about it is he killed, like I said, he was doing it like it was nothing. Like,
Well,
so,
well, the truth of the matter is there's a role for forensic witnesses.
yeah.
And so you can assess somebody's dangerous based on their lack of empathy. Their willingness to engage in other types of activities, for example, drug use. Mental illness is a factor in dangerousness, but in terms of mental illness, the most significant element of dangerousness has to do with psychopathy, meaning those individuals who are psychopathic and have little empathic reach. And the presentation
Describe
here,
Trump.
huh?
Describe Trump.
The presentation here has to do with presenting elements of assessing dangerousness in terms of anger management communication solutions. In our program, we talk about fragmentation as a very important construct looking at dangerousness. Again, dangerousness in the political sense is an ascribed rather than an objective phenomena. A lot of black men were described as dangerous coming out of slavery. And the black codes and all of the governmental actors having to deal with dangerous birth names had to do with this idea that blacks were dangerous actors. And so they could be, there was a lot of prosecutorial anxiety related to black bodies.
Still is.
You know, and so that becomes part of the deal here. So, you know, dangerousness, you know, in terms of looking at it in terms of a very intellectually subconstructed way, you know, we talk about propensity, tendency, you know, however you would define it. The bottom line is that you have to look at the incidents and who are the actors creating dangerous situations. And so, you know, it's not very predictive. A lot of what we do as forensic psychiatrists is not very predictive. The important elements in predicting dangerousness is previous dangerous behavior, drug use, primarily alcohol, psychopathy, lack of empathy, and the important thing is contextual, crime, you know, having stressors in your life, immediate stressors that nobody really knows about can affect you and how you behave ultimately. Again, dangerousness is contextual. I mean, people may look at somebody and say they're dangerous, but dangerous is contextual. I mean, it has to be viewed in context of other things. You have to look at opportunity, means, and victim. Who is going to be the victim? This is a country where you have thousands of people being killed by guns. And the big debate in America is about dangerousness. Stand your ground laws and so forth gives people the justification to have guns. But guns kill a lot of folks. You know, and guns plus use of alcohol plus domestic violence and all of this stuff can add to the dangerousness, including mental illness.
Yeah, mental illness. Yeah.
You know, but in terms of looking at the common factors, looking at dangerousness in our program, we talk a lot about the fact that fragmentation is a common starting point. And in our last lecture, we talk about fragmentation and resiliency in terms of how it informs anger management communication solutions and looking at the architecture of violence, how you handle it. So, common factors that may affect dangerousness is, of course, mental illness. Psychopathy, of course, is the number one thing in looking at mental illness. The access to guns, means, poverty, you know, low intelligence, poor education, socioeconomic marginalization, drug use, primarily alcohol, past violent behavior. These are very important constructs. In 1989, looking at released mental ill patients, one of the things that was very important in Murray's report was that ethnicity and race was not separable from socioeconomic factors, meaning that race in and of itself gives you nothing.
It's not an
Doesn't
indicator of
play a role.
anything.
It's not like an indicator of anything.
Human beings is subject to action depending on their conditions and
Right.
and
It's not separable from socioeconomic factors.
Okay.
But you it's hard for me to explain that to certain people who have this kind of conformational bias about the dangerousness of black men. You know. So again, fragmentation for us is the starting point. Again, fragmentation by definition is the disintegration, collapse, or breakdown of norms of thoughts, behavior, and social relationships. The key there is social relationships. Social relationships. That guy in Ferguson, Missouri, did not have a relationship with that fellow he killed and left in the street for 4 hours. You wouldn't treat a dog that way. He had no relationship with that young black fellow, that 18-year-old black fellow who was going through his own whatever. He had no relationship with that person. There was no depressive anxiety. It was only prosecutorial anxiety. He knew based on where that fellow was and how the society viewed him, he could kill that fellow and get away with it based on prosecutorial anxiety. Because there was no depressive anxiety to counter anything. So fragmentation is when you're solving a problem very quickly. With fragmentation, you have loss of intimacy, whereby those intimate spaces become non-usable or limited to a quicker response to a perceived danger or loss or threat. Again, you got to remember that your choice and how you act is informed on a number of things. But when you're fragmenting and you have no relationship with the person you're dealing with, and you try to solve that problem very quickly, you rely on some very simplistic explanation, and then you try to go back post-event and try to justify your actions. And you justify those actions based on confirmational bias. Tamir Rice, 10-year-old boy sitting in a park where all the little boys sit in the park. I've sat in the park with toy guns when I was a kid. The cop rolls up, and within less than a minute, he's shot dead.
Less than seconds.
He's shot dead.
It was like 13 seconds.
He's a 12-year-old boy. And then the next day, the newspaper began to look for justification for his killing. Well, his father had a criminal record, not Tamir Rice, but his father, and therefore there was an implication of dangerousness to this 12-year-old boy, dangerous black body.
Learned it from his dad, right?
Learned from that. So even as a kid, you don't have the access to that as a kid. So dangerousness is prosecutorial anxiety. And when you begin to experience prosecutorial anxiety, fragmentation becomes an option. You have to act fast and with very limited information. And then the society has to be willing to back you up. And so McCrory in North Carolina said we're going to suppress videotape evidence for police malfeasance and bad action.
That's crazy.
But that's what they're going to do. They're going to try to do it anyway. And so one of the most important parts of this talk today is about this idea of consciousness in transition. Human beings, we all, if we have language, access to language, we have a consciousness, and that consciousness has an architectural design to it. When you're a kid, you engage in what we term mastery. Choice is informed by your aesthetics, what you like, increasing pleasure, decreasing pain. Usually what you rely on mastery is force. You break toys, you throw them off ledges. It's all about, you're just having fun. So the level of speech and speech acquisition is about ethic speech and discursive normalization. It's in framing. You're labeling, you're naming, it's meaningless conversation. Everything there's nothingness there. Because your choice is not informed by any kind of cultural input. Power unto death, again, it's about aesthetics, it's about control, domination. It's what's about force. I can destroy if I need to destroy. I don't have a relationship with that object that I'm controlling. It's about force. Again, what happens with power unto death is that there's a reciprocity there that kicks in. Because what happens is that prosecutorial anxiety is triggered. If I can kill you, guess what? You can also kill me. And that becomes scary. And so what power unto death does, it gives you a sense of nothingness, death, nihilism, where if I destroy you and you no longer exist, then I am no longer able to exist either. So the only defense against nihilism and death and destruction of the other is to assume depressive anxiety of relationships. And the depressive position of assuming relationships with other one is the basis of the bedrock foundation of what our program is about. It's the idea that you overcome loss and grief with what? Intimacy. Intimacy is everything. Intimacy, if you don't have love, you got to have intimacy. And if you have intimacy, you can work most things through. Because intimacy suggests you care about somebody. Aesthetic intimacy. You care for somebody. You take the extra time to to get to understand them, to have an empathic connect up with that person. So the third level of conscious development is the master-slave relationship. It's an unfortunate term, but I think it's very helpful because master-slave, it's about who owns what. The master owns the prosecutorial anxiety. The slave owns the depressive anxiety. The slave wants to have a relationship because the master can destroy it. So the slave realized that there has to be intimacy available in order to overcome prosecutorial anxiety. So you want to take on a relationship with someone. You begin to meet expectations, and this helps to facilitate recovery. So you begin to obey rules, you adhere to expectations, and as you begin to learn about these things, it begins to enhance your knowledge of what you need in order to survive some very dangerous situation. But you begin to understand that the need for intimacy becomes very, very important. And the need for intimacy begins to inform choice. So, force, even in master-slave relationship, becomes the operant element facilitating action. I'm fearful of this person hurting me, therefore I will behave. And as long as I can have an intimate relationship, I will obey the rules, I will do what I need to do in order to survive. So that's number 3, the master-slave relationship. Stoicism is the beginning, is the embryonic beginning of acquiring true power. That's why they teach this stuff in the military academy, Stoicism, acceptance of the need for intimacy in order to recover. What Stoicism does is that Stoicism requires you have to live with reduced levels of intimacy. Everybody wants more and more intimacy. I want more and more of this, I want more and more of that. So it's ascesis. So being still and just supporting someone being. That's the start of power, true power, self-control. True power is about self-control, right? So the problem with Stoicism, though, is that you have to begin dealing with less and less intimacy, and so you become to be a skeptic, and so skepticism is being somewhat of a cynic, being somewhat cosmopolitan, but it's also another step in mastery of self. Now, you become a wise ass. Let's be honest with you. Skepticism is becoming a wise ass and learning how to deal with need for intimacy. You need more intimacy. So the cop is telling you to do this, so you say, yes, sir. Yes, sir. So shucking and jiving was for the benefits of not for black folks back in the day in the antebellum South. It was for the benefit of white folks who were in the role of master, and they had the option of bringing death to their slaves. So shucking and jiving was really to, oh yeah, you're having fun with them. I don't know how many times when I wasn't born in this country, but it's one of those things that I learned in growing up in Brooklyn, shucking and jiving. And I didn't understand what it was in terms of language. But then one of my friends, one older black guy told me, man, shucking and jiving for white folks, man. It's not for you. Fuck you. Shucking and jiving is to make sure that person who can bring death to you don't bring it to you. So I can act like a fool, and you would think I'm a fool. You think I'm a fool, right? Well, yeah, you may feel good about me, right? Yeah. One of my heroes, the people that I find heroic, are old black fools who survived to old age. Their mom used to say, it's like reading Shakespeare. The people who survived were the fools.
Yeah.
Because they were able to bring intimacy to their lives when they had to buckle under some very, very difficult circumstances. So skepticism, you create the power to begin to create intimate spaces for yourself so you can thrive. So your choice of action is now informed by real power. That is self-control. Control over yourself. So the sixth stage of conscious development is the unhappy consciousness. You're doing the right thing, but it's not always easy. How many times have we, if you're a mature American, you know that you're doing a lot of things when you know it's not easy. You're taking care of relatives who you know that these don't really deserve a damn thing you're giving them. You know, but it's the unhappy consciousness. You're doing it because they think they're smarter than you are, man. How many times you deal with people? They think they're so smarter than you are, but
That's
it's
what
the unhappy consciousness. So you go along with them, and you say, "All right, okay." And so it's about self empowerment. It's the mastery of the self. It's cosmopolitanism. Cosmopolitanism is the recognition of sameness and diversity. Cosmopolitanism. Remember when we put this together on the web page, Cosmopolitanism? We have a page on cosmopolitanism.
I was just talking to Don about that page. I said I haven't seen
Well, we haven't had a writer to put it together, but I have to get a budget. And once I get a budget, we're gonna start talking about it. In our Cosmopolitan page, we had guys like Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, Clint Eastwood.
We had wonderful Americans who by their examples were able to suggest. For me, when I came up with that page and talked about Clint Eastwood, it was about looking at one of his movies where he was using some jazz, black jazz standards, and he introduced my world to me.
Around about midnight, wasn't it?
The guy. Well, then you're right that Clint Eastwood is a jazz musician.
Yeah.
And he just blew me away. Brizzo of Madison County. Oprah Winfrey was pushing that forever and ever and ever. And I'd say, Oprah, I don't know that. So one day I was sitting in my apartment by myself, and I said, Clint Eastwood walking through here. I said, man, bring me a cowboy picture. Oh no, Brizzo. Oh God. That's why I sat and watched it. It was a classic. It was a classic with the jazz elements, the love interest.
When you were living on the beach?
Well, where I was living at the time, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But it was a classic. The music, the idea that cultures that's different from your own can inform you about your own life. The sameness and diversity. You go through the same thing. Enjoying jazz music and understanding the artistry of jazz music. And so we had that page. We can try to put it together once we get some money again. Anyway, the number 7th layer is rational choice. This is Hegel's stuff, and I just adopted it and made good curry with it. I thought it was very helpful, and I adopted it to my essential architecture form. But rational choice is what God would do. God is doing His own thing. We are empowered. God gives us free will, and that's the greatest gift that God has given us. And the highest level of acting, and acting is based on freedom and free choice. Rational choice. Everything human beings do is about choice. Even when you think you're behaving because you're afraid somebody's going to really destroy you or harm you, it's about choice. Because when you go to power unto death, why power unto death is so powerful is that you might decide in that moment that I don't really care what you do to me. You can kill me, but I will drown you in my blood. Go ahead, beat me to death, but I'll make sure that I drown you in my blood. You could punch me in my nose, and I'll make sure I break your hand when you punch me in my nose.
Yeah, that's right.
So how do you deal with that? Force. They got you.
Right.
That's not real. Force is not real power. Power is having people do the right thing for a rational reason, right? That it's the right thing to do. Anyway, so that was so we talk about the difference between force and power. Again, power ultimately power is the mastery of self. And again, we saw the embryonic start of true power at the level of stoicism, living with reduced intimacy, accepting and taking control over your own life. That's the start. Then you go from stoicism to skepticism, where you're having fun with it. And you're trying to create that intimate space for yourself where you can survive people just destroying you, harming you. One of the wonderful movies, art becomes very important. Mimesis, anti-mimesis. Remember Blazing Saddle?
Mm-hmm.
That's a classic.
It's
a classic. And as a person, as a young man growing up, when I saw that movie, I can look at it right now every so often, and it's a joy.
Yeah, Mel Brooks.
It's a joy. There was one scene where Black Bart, the sheriff, It's being confronted by the townsfolk who they want. They were about to lynch him because he didn't want a black sheriff.
Yeah.
And Black Bart pulled a gun on himself and said, "Move out, shoot the nigger."
Yeah, don't shoot. And they were all like,
And they were, "Don't shoot him, no!" That is good stuff, man. But that is skepticism. It's creating an intimate space where people can look and laugh and have fun with each other.
right.
You know, it's alleged that Richard Pryor wrote another scene that I loved in that movie. You know, the whole idea of black guys having big penises.
Yeah.
And there was this one scene in that movie where the Black Bart was there with this saloon mistress, and she was saying she was in the dark, and she said, "It's true, it's true, it's true." You remember that scene? And Black Bart says, "Woman, will you stop licking my arm?" That is good stuff, man. that is skepticism, and that's wonderful stuff.
Oh, my
Yeah,
God.
I mean, it was just wonderful stuff. I mean, there's another scene I love in that movie where the guy was, Black Bart was sinking into the quicksand, and the white person who liked to have him sink, Camptown Racetrack, came up and decided to save the plow as opposed to saving
Anyway.
threw the lasso around the piece of equipment
Yeah.
to save the human being. I mean, come on, man. That is some good
That was
stuff.
some good stuff.
That is some good stuff. That is
Yeah.
skepticism.
Yeah.
Skepticism is dealing with stupidity
Yeah.
and having fun with it, where
Yeah.
and art helps you to deal with that.
In Living Color did the same thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
art, my
yeah.
nieces,
In Living Color?
In Living
the
Color.
Greeks, my nieces, Antimaemesis, Aristophanes.
Yes.
This is good stuff, right?
Oh, yeah,
Anyway,
we
so
did.
power versus force. Now, force polarizes. It creates winners and losers. It diminishes you. It always creates a counter force. It always requires justification. It requires the need to label things as dangerous or not dangerous. Power uplifts, it dignifies, it gives life and agency to people. It requires no justifications. It comes from an evolved consciousness. Force versus power. Force always moves against something. It's always trying to label something or destroy something. It consumes, it limits, it destroys, it takes away. It's judgmental. It creates conflict. It creates victims. True power has no targets. It just provides for life. It gives life. It gives energy. It gives meaning. It stands still. It requires nothing. It demands nothing. It has no needs. It provides for agency and meaning and support. It's compassionate and it's kind. That's power. One of the things that is very understanding and to understand as a human being, and it's the skeptic's mantra is that we all live in fields, and in our fields, people give us so much value. And guys like William James, in the last 2 centuries ago, talks about cash value in your field, what people value in you or not value in you. Guys like Pierre Bourdieu talk about your field and what you can have, the capital structures that are invested in your field. So we all live in fields, and people decide what we have and what is valuable and what is not valuable. And I'm always, it's a very hurtful situation when you're in a situation where people are making attributions about you that's based on the fact that you have no value, that you're nothing. It is the hardest thing to live with as a human being. And the only way you can truly deal with that is to have power in your own evolving consciousness, to be a stoic, to be a skeptic, to understand that there's going to be unhappy consciousness where you have to do things for mofos that don't deserve it, and then rational choice. It's all about choice. It's all about the freedom that God has given to us, right? So, every human being, we tend to define each other. Ethics speech, we tend to define each other. Donald Trump defines what black people are and their communities. The only thing he sees in the black community is dangerousness. It's like Afghanistan. People get walked around, you get shot. You know, there's so much to the black experience in America, so much richness, jazz, music, food. They had the recent opening of the African American Museum, Smithsonian African American Museum. I gotta go there.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful. Of course, I'm gonna go. Wonderful, wonderful building because when you talk about the American experience, you're talking about the American experience. You know, the sameness and diversity. You know, and so that becomes very important. So our sense of value informs our choices in how we act and how we treat each other. Usually, if you invest in somebody through aesthetic intimacy, you invest in them or you don't. And the most cruel thing that you can experience in life is when somebody decides not to invest in you, and you know they're not investing in you. Through narcissism, through their own personal narcissism, and they can't give you anything. They only want things from you. You know, and that's and in our parents we learned about something called the as if personality. The as if personality, they got nothing to give you. You can only give them stuff. You know, and that is very painful.
Yeah.
So so our field becomes very important, and what people give us or not give us is very important. You know, people either think we're cute or not cute, and sometimes this goes from here to there and everywhere. It's very ethic. It's based usually on nothing.
Whatever happened to mediocre though, Dad? Like T.I. says, I don't want no mediocre. I mean, really, seriously?
The mediocre, what do you mean by that?
Meaning like they ain't cute, but they ain't exactly ugly either. You know, it's mediocre. I don't want no mediocre. I don't want a mediocre bad bitch.
Aesthetics. Aesthetics. You know, you look at our program, we have the aesthetics. And when we designed that system, if you notice that the aesthetics piece is about what? A house that's what? Not form.
Yeah.
It's just aesthetics. It's a beautiful place. You can make that house anything you want it to make it. But you can't live in that space. You know, you can have lots of wonderful and wild sex in that space. You say, this is going to be my house. You see it? It's a beautiful house. I'm going to have a room here. I'm going to have a room there. Come here, honey, and have fun with me while you can look at my house. It's all aesthetically pleasing. It's going to be beautiful. I'm going to have a big this and a big that. And it's going to be beautiful. But you can't live there. So the woman hooks up with a guy and says, oh, yeah, let's have all this crazy sex. Oh, yeah. And then the woman gets pregnant. She says, but I need to have a home for my baby. I have to have somebody have to go work. So moral force is now being able to compel somebody to create a home. And when you look at our diagram, that house that's now formed with walls and a place to live and whatever. My moniker, when I said that we designed our system, we always had the aesthetic piece, and there was only one green in that part of the diagram. What was that piece that had green?
Was it a tree?
The ball.
Oh, the ball. Okay.
Only the ball.
Okay, yeah,
In our system of colors, green is color agency. It's art. It's about art. And playful. So you give kids you have to give them something to have their imagination. Human beings who are not kids want to be able to create a home so they can raise people. Culturally, going from ethic speech, I got a beautiful house, you're going to be this, I can run around with a ball, I can play, I can have fun. That's ethic. Idostic speech is when you decide, no, I need to build a house with walls, with a tree, with a grass, with a carport, I need a job. Moral force is I have to take care of other people. The moral force of taking care of them. Now, transcendency is about power. The transcendent power is to be able to allow people to be and become whatever you would like them to be and become so they can take care of God's wonderful world. So, getting back to you. I don't know if you noticed this, man, but I've met a lot of beautiful, beautiful women in my life. But they mean nothing to me. Because it's had nothing to do with me. And when you do get to know them, you realize they got all sorts of problems. And one of the biggest problems they may have is that they may treat you like nothing. They have no investment in you. But then you have somebody who is maybe not the most attractive person. They come into your life, they're kind and they're caring, and they'll your brains out,
Dad, a lot of that
and
is
they'll
just
provide
makeup.
you, huh?
A lot of that is just makeup and extensions. I mean, come on, you'll get past that. Come on, are you
What do you
serious?
call aesthetics?
Yeah, aesthetics. Like, oh, she's so beautiful, man. Please.
But
get
that's
out of
aesthetics.
here.
That's
just
aesthetics.
makeup,
That's aesthetics.
lipstick.
But for me, a woman who can then go into the kitchen and make you a nice corned beef sandwich,
Means a lot.
that means a lot. Rick, there's the comedian Chris Rock said something very funny. He said, any woman can give you a blowjob, but only takes a real woman to do what?
Give you a
Make gravy.
Make gravy.
Love that line.
That's a great one.
That's aesthetics.
Yeah.
But the idea is true. I mean, basically, you want somebody who can extend themselves in a much more meaningful way to create an intimate space, an empathic, intimate space for you, right?
Chris Rock also said, tired of chicken, can we get some duck?
That's a funny one.
I didn't hear that, but that's funny. Duck is nice. I have no problem with duck. You have a problem with duck? I don't like duck. It's too fatty.
Yeah.
It's too fatty.
It's
Too fatty.
so much.
Anyway, so that becomes that. So we are all trapped by our fields. How people define us, what they're willing to give us or not give us. And a lot of times we run into anger management problems based on the fact that people want to keep us in a certain space and don't want to get us up from that space and don't want to provide the where or the means in order to become something better than that. They don't want us. They just want us to exist as a nothing. When you exist as a nothing, you don't have to invest in that thing. Yes? So we go on and on and on about there's a lot of problems with the nature of truth, what is truth. One of the things that you got to keep in mind is that with prosecutorial anxiety, when we feel overwhelmed, that fragmentation is one of those things that can happen very quickly. And in our last lecture, we talked about fast track, slow track, the importance of having intimate spaces. And you have to be careful of fragmentation, because when you have fragmentation, you're trying to solve problems very quickly based on very simple information and wanting to have things happen real fast. You want to go from, going from a diatribe where you're experiencing loss and having a discussion takes a lot of time. And even when you get into a place of a dialogue, you're not necessarily solving a problem. You're just maybe creating the accommodations for somebody to improve and get better.
Framing a solution.
You're framing a solution. So, a tractor, you have to look at the pattern where you're dealing with anger management communication solutions. You have to be able to be mindful of where you are in the communication cycle. I'm in a diatribe. This person is just bringing up loss after loss after loss with me. Then that is not very helpful. You have to move the conversation from diatribe to a discussion. But even in discussion, you're not solving a problem. You're simply giving people a chance to elaborate on what their loss might be. I don't have any money. I don't have any clothes. I don't have anybody who respects me. I'm relying entirely on force. I don't have any self-control. One of the things that I experienced in my professional life today was a young lady who was having real significant problems acting out. Young girl, she was a teenager, acting out sexually, and I can't go into too much information, because people who know me will know what I'm talking about, and I got to be careful with that, what I say. But one of the things that I pointed out to her was that your entire life is about force. You're forcing people to do this, that, and the other, and you got to understand that the only real power you have in life is yourself. You have to work on yourself. And one of the first stages that you go through is stoicism, where you be still and you accept things as they are. And you just take care to provide people an opportunity to help you. And the problem with that is that as a person who hasn't had a lot of intimacy in their life, that is a very scary place. I talked to you about the guy on the bus. The bus is broken down, and he's now white knuckling it because he looks around and there's just devastation in that town, and that comports with what he has internally in his own life. And so he is overwhelmed by that. And so we live in our own heads, and sometimes it informs our choices. But the only thing that gets us from that place is to acquire true power, to create an intimate space for ourselves, and to understand that a lot of times when we recover, it's based on facilitated recovery, how we help other people, how do we help our kids, how we help people who are in our lives to get better. And for me, as a psychiatrist, one of the things that I look for is that transition. I'm always looking for that transition from force. I'm going to do what I got to do. I'm going to do it, to true power, which is standing still and being able to deal with less. And you got to practice that. And so one of the things that I've been doing in my personal life is that for the last several months I've been sleeping on the floor or sleeping on a couch. I've given up my bed because for me it's practicing. It's the idea of living with less and being okay with it. You got to practice this stuff. I mean,
Living with
General
less.
McChrystal, warrior, stoic. You live with less. One meal a day. You run. You exercise. You're a soldier.
Epicurean.
So it's important that you practice these things. You can't always trying to be getting the best of everything. You can't always trying to, have duck.
Damn duck. Sometimes you just gotta eat chicken.
Sometimes you just have to eat chicken or just
But
eat
what I'm
soup.
getting from you, Albert, is I'm getting from you a sense that how we deal with each situation is based on our personal experiences. Like if I've had a lot of loss in my life, when I have another loss, it's just like too much. Instead of and somebody else who may have had a happier life when they go through something, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure. It's your experiences affect how you deal with the things that
Always,
happen in your life.
always,
So that's how something can become overwhelming
always.
when you've had so much loss.
Yeah.
When something else happens, it's like you're stacking one thing on top of another
Right.
until you explode.
Right.
And since you're not able to deal with it very well, that's when you might start to fragment.
Where you see the wonderful thing about religion is that it informs you of what you have to do,
Stand still and
You
see the
stand still.
salvation of the Lord.
and you accept. That's stoicism. The Stoics of all the philosophical schools that the Greeks had, the Christians loved stoicism because it meant that you accepted things and you accepted the fact that you don't have control or you can't force things.
Yeah, that's where the pain comes from.
I want to be in a
It's not
place.
just the loss; it's the power of not being able to do nothing. I think that's more painful a lot of times than the loss. You say, I wish I could have did something,
But you think you try to force it. You try
Yeah,
to force
exactly.
it, and you have no real.
and that's what you say you got to.
The only power you have is over yourself, man.
Yeah, exactly. Being able to deal with it in a certain way.
The only power you have is over yourself. So, this William James. Anything short of God is not rational. Anything more than God is not possible. Love that. And so rational choice is based on an evolved consciousness of who we are, and to understand the difference between force and power. A lot of times we deal with force because sometimes we reduce and we think that's all we've got. But power trumps force every time.
I think I get it a little bit. It's just like when a situation comes up, like with me, when I see a problem, instead of standing still and seeing how I can work it out, I try to come up with all these many solutions, right?
You
I
get
can
back-
do
Enforce it.
this too, I can do
Yeah.
this one, or I could go that way, or I could go this way. And then what ends up happening is I move too fast and the solution was there waiting for me.
So in ending, one of the things that William James talked about was the dilemma of determinism. Determinism. How determinism. The idea that things are determined in our lives, that we have some things that are just there and
Predestination.
predestined. And you got to understand that free will is a gift from God, and it informs choice, and choice informs action. There's no coercion attached. God even gave us the power to say that He doesn't exist. Unfortunately, the choice that says God doesn't exist has led to a lot of separation from God and all of the attached consequences, including death.
Death is eternity in hell.
So the importance of moving from bargaining to acceptance becomes very important. With acceptance, you're able to establish an intimate space for yourself. Um, Acceptance is the acquisition of knowledge, which leads to intimacy, and it creates an intimate space for yourself. But acceptance means that you have to stop searching for information. At some point, you have to accept that people are wonderful, they're kind, and you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. Sadness is always destructive, and it requires cognitive understanding and practicing, where sadness becomes an understanding of what your loss is, and loss is necessary. Judith Yorst talks about this, a wonderful book that I read maybe when I was in training 20 years ago. The idea that loss is necessary. In order to accept your loss, you're able to grow once you accept your loss. Again, intimacy provides for the power to become transcendent in this world. Transcendency is about providing for safety, security, service, and support in the beloved community. So everything is about intimacy. God, once we became separated from God, the one thing that God gave us was intimacy. And as we like to say, intimacy in 5 acts. Intimacy in 5 acts. Storge, Eros, Philia, Xenia, and Agape. Intimacy, about having relationships with other human beings. So, dangerousness in context, and looking at anger management in 3D. Again, black life does matter, so does all life. All life matters. Um, Police violence in America is very, very sad, but the history of it is very, 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 very complicated. And a lot of times it conflates dangerousness with communities, and it gives you some real problems. In looking at empathy as an element, one of the things that was very interesting, this is not an American phenomenon, it's a worldwide phenomenon. In the Ottoman Empire, when the Ottoman Empire was breaking up, the Armenians were second-class citizens. They couldn't testify in courts against certain citizens, first-world citizens, because they were an ethnic minority. Eventually, what happened, because they were deemed dangerous, the state eventually ended up exterminating about 1 million of them.
Genocide.
Genocide. So now, in America, revanchist conservatism has been in play for at least 20, 30 years. And ground zero has been North Carolina, where they're doing all sorts of things to deny people the right to democratic solutions to their problems. You had the Republican governance capturing state organ and then doing a lot of damaging things to damage democracy. Now, in our program, we talk about anger management, communication in 3D. So for us, it's a cognitive behavioral therapy. It has to do with dialectical behavioral understanding of what it is that you have to understand about communication, how it informs your choice. Again, for us, it's like a shield, if it's understood in that way. And in our program, we talk about it being a shield. a shield in the old Greek army was very important. The shield was the most important part of a soldier's life because it protected the community, it protected your fellow soldiers, and you didn't want to drop it. You don't want to get rid of it. The shield was very important. With anger management communication solutions, the ability to understand the progression when you lose things and how it progresses to destructive behavior in terms of fragmentation is very important to understand. And we are in the process of collecting information to complete our book, eponymously entitled The Essential Architecture of Loss and Grief.
You're low on battery, so.
So I think that's it.
Awesome.
So what do you guys think?
I think that I learned something today about myself and how I deal with the different issues that come up, as far as learning to sit back and to stay still and not try to move and push and force things into happening. Sometimes I bring more problems that way. I noticed that with my daughter, when something happens, she starts thinking of all these different solutions and she gets into a frenzy. And instead of standing still and trying to, and waiting or being satisfied in where you are, you try to force your way through the square hole and you're round. And now you're stuck in the hole.
No, I get through.
She got 2 daughters.
Exactly.
You gonna out yourself.
Well, yourself, I have more than one daughter. But it's just like me and Melvin. At the beginning, one of the things that was really strong, we got a house, and we just managed to move into the house, and we got some old furniture, and we made do for the first 5 years. We didn't buy furniture, we didn't buy cars, we didn't buy TVs, we didn't buy anything.
Couldn't afford it.
First 5 years, we didn't have cable. We didn't have cable, we had videos.
Yeah.
No, we had cable.
After a while,
Yeah, we
that's one of the splurging things we did for you.
we had DVR.
I don't even remember that.
You don't even remember that. So when I see you move into a house,